Hello, good evening, and welcome to this thrilling first episode of Exam Technique for Route A. It's Unit 1. This is for China under Mao from 1949 to 1976. I know that's the year I was born. So let's take a look. This is for at-home students, one of them being Amelia. So I'm really going to walk you through this. I've sat this paper myself. There's a lot of clues. It's some would say it's challenging. Personally, I think there is so much that's going to be in this new style of paper that you can really use what is written on there to really get good marks. Let's move on. I don't want to keep this video too long because I tend to waffle. But if we just go through, before we begin, it is important that I would say this for every exam in the world, okay? Whether it's for a driving test, whether it's simply for an aptitude test, heck, if it's even going for a job in the future, it is important that you decode every question. You need to consider the command words. Now, whenever you ask somebody to do something in everyday life, you always begin with a word, okay, or there'll be a word in the sentence, or rather the question, that will ask that person to do a specific thing. It goes as easy as drink a can of Tango, which I intend to later because I'm very thirsty. But you would not, if you said balance the can of Tango on your head, you'd be commanding them to do something completely different. So it's worth bearing in mind what those questions are going to ask you to do. And we'll just go through those by showing you the different types of words you will come across. Explain is going to be in there, okay, or suggest. But to explain is simply to provide a number of reasons showing how or why each contributed to the event named in the question. Could be the event, could be a certain policy, it could be a certain mission. We have to leave sort of an open space there for interpretation, but I'm going to guess it'll be an event to explain something. It is history, so it's going to be an event, okay? I mean, this is not English. Let's explain Cranks's character in Of Mice and Men, okay? So we will just use that as being an event. So you really just have to provide a number of reasons showing how and why each contributed to build up that event, okay? You could explain why an event happened or what happened because of an event, okay? A biggie there would be, why did the 3 years of crisis happen? Because of the Great Leap Forward, okay? But I don't want to go into too much detail. If we move on to the next command word, which is definitely in there, I believe, looking at my notes, I've sat this test, but I think it's one, I think it is 1C. For instance, we'll ask you to explain. And then I think later on in the paper, even though we're just going to be looking at the first question 1, and that is question 1A, 1B, and 1C. So there's 3 parts to that question. We'll be moving on to describe later, but it's worth getting these out of the way now. Describe is a little bit different. You just have to provide specific detail. In other words, when you're describing something, they are looking at your own knowledge there, really. They want you to go in as much detail as you can and get that down on the paper, okay? So the definition of describe is provide specifics, or the specific factual detail upon the key issue named in the question. I'm sure there would be bonus points there for if there were certain treaties or certain reforms, agrarian reforms in China, certain terms such as Maoists, the moderates, okay? So instead of saying, keeping it sort of basic by saying, there were people that didn't like Mao, if you said they were the moderates that didn't like Mao's reforms, then you really are hitting the big point scale there, where people can actually turn, the markers rather, will turn around and think, whoa, this person knows their stuff. And I'm sure you will know all of these terms and replace them where appropriate. If we look at the larger questions on the paper then, which is normally your question 1C, question 2C, and of course the final question being question 3, This will be how important, how successful, how far, how useful. These questions will sort of be how far. For instance, I'm going to use an example here, and I must stress that this is just a template, and this comes from the specimen exam papers. So I cannot guarantee that the questions are on here are going to be in the exam. However, if you follow the format, you have got a real strong grounding and a great basis for putting your own answers together. But just to go back to how important, how successful, how far, how useful, these are what I would class as being evaluative command words, in an aspect that they are going to get you to give a two-side balance. Okay, so for instance, how important, just not to use China, but to keep this simple, which I like to do, how important is driving a car in the year 2015? Well, I would expect you to come up with something saying, it is very important because you can get back and forth to work. However, it is not that important when you think that you can use buses, which is a cheaper option. You could buy a bike if your place of work was not so close. So it's not that important because of money you could save. However, it is important if that place of work is a long way away, and it means that you're going to earn more money by getting there. I'm sure that is completely missing the point, but it's trying to keep it very basic. When we reach question 3 later, you will see how in these history exam papers we are looking for you to give an evaluation and your own judgment, for you to say yes, it was very important, or no, it was not important at all, such as how important was the Great Leap Forward. Well, it was important because there had to be changes made to China. However, it wasn't that important because of the outcome, because it caused a great famine, okay, and it was a heck of a failure. Okay, so we'll move on from that, and I will really try and keep this as easy to understand as possible. Okay, so Unit 1 is a study in depth focusing on source evaluation and historical interpretations, and they are in there. You will be dealing with definitely a different amount of visual sources. They've thrown in a new question about historical interpretation. Don't worry or panic about that. Those things are really not as challenging or as difficult as they first appear. They're really not. As I said, I've sat this exam paper, so I know how to use the exam paper for your advantage, for your benefit, okay? How to get little clues, little hints out of there, and it really is technique, and that's what we're aiming for. The second point that I've just revealed here, the exam paper will test your knowledge and understanding through the evaluation of historical sources and interpretations of the past. Okay, so that's simply repeating what I've already said, but what I'm trying to do here is give you a formula, and you'll see how the slides work out here, that I'm trying to explain to you what we need from you in each question. So these slides even follow a pattern, because I am that good. Yeah, that's right. I want to kiss myself. Okay, if we move on, you will have to answer all 3 sections testing your particular skills. This is important because some people seem to think I can pick and choose what questions. No, in Unit 1, when you sit this for China, you will need to answer every question. It will last for 1 hour and 15 minutes, but the important thing is that all questions on this paper have to be answered, okay? It's pointless thinking, oh, I thought you only had to answer 1 of each question. No, everything. If we look at the way it pans out in Unit 1, you have questions 1, which are broken down to 1A, 1B, 1C. Question 2 is 1A, 1B, 1C as well. And I think we've spoken about this, that it is a tier system. So the first question A of 1 and question A of 2 are worth 4 marks. Question B is then 6 marks, and question 1C is worth 8, whereas question 2C is worth 10. Okay, the final one is an essay. So in this video, we are just looking at question 1A, 1B, and 1C. Okay, I'm quickly going to move on. By the end of it, we will go through each one in a, we will go through each of the questions in different videos. But for this one, we're just looking at question 1A, 1B, and 1C. So if we move on, question 1A. Now, the question will always start what the sources A and B suggest about. Now, this will be the same if you were doing a German paper, if you were doing British foreign policy, if you were looking at any of the Unit 1 questions. They all begin with what the sources A and B suggest about, and then the ellipsis, then the 3 dots here. There'll be another part of the question coming in. So you'll see what I'm trying to do here. If we move on, question 1A is a selection of information from 2 sources, and it's worth 4 marks. Okay. The skill we're looking for in this one is for you to extract information, to take information from each of the 2 sources, and these 2 sources could be of written or visual origin. I mean, by that, I'm saying they could be posters, they could be photographs, they could be cartoons, they could be an extract from a textbook, a GCSE textbook, or from written down words from a speech. But I'm not going to be able to say that all of these are going to be written, or all of them are going to be pictures, or all of them are going to be cartoons. That's where you have to jump in there and take from each one what you can. And it really isn't that hard. I'll give you an example of this one. Remembering there are no marks awarded for your own knowledge in this question, so really stick to what you see. You guys might be some of you guys may be too young to remember catchphrase, but it really is a case of just say what you see here. Okay, Roy Walker would be so proud. Okay, I'm moving on. So an example of question 1A, and I got this from the specimen paper, is what the sources A and B suggest about relations between China and the USA in the 1970s. And this is worth 4 marks. Okay. Now, I've done this with the German paper, and a lot of my students thought straight away, oh my gosh, I can't even stop to think about what happened in the relations between. You would maybe have a knee-jerk reaction and say, I don't even know what the relations between China and the USA in the 1970s were. But if you play detective, and if you stop and you think of yourself as a detective more than a GCSE historian at this point, we are just asking you to give us the basic facts. Now, if we look at source A, even though Mao's got kind of a grumpy face here, that is Mao smiling. Okay, so imagine if he was angry. But if we look at Nixon, all teeth, yeah, and beaming here, he's definitely smiling. And I think one of the most important things to notice here is the shaking of the hands. Okay, so source A is telling us that Chairman Mao welcomes President Nixon to China in 1972, and yes, that did take place. Okay, and they did build firm relations there. They really did. Okay, source B then says, this is the week that will change the world, but what we have said today is not nearly as important as what we will do in the years ahead. We will build a bridge across 16,000 miles and 22 years of hostilities which have divided us in the past, and what we have said today is that we shall build that bridge. And that comes from the US President Nixon. Okay, so that's a speech that he made in China in February 1972. And simply by looking at these 2 sources, you can see, if you were clever or observant enough, that you can see that these 2 sources take place and are written or photographed at the same time in the same year. Okay, so let's have a look. These 2 sources, I can give the written answer, which I wrote myself, okay, are showing that relations between China and the USA are improving. If you take the evidence that is given to you in this photograph, you can see that there is a sign of friendship, okay? And if you read the speech that Nixon has made, he's actually said that this is an important day, okay, that will change the world, and a bridge has been built across 16,000 miles and 22 years of hostilities. So both of these sources are suggesting an improvement. Let's go into the answer I've written, and I can explain kind of writing technique a little bit better. Okay, so I wrote, from the two sources provided, I can see that they show an improvement in relations between China and the USA. Okay, for example, source A shows an act of friendship between the two leaders, Chairman Mao of China and President Nixon of the USA. All of this information is given to you on the paper, so there's no own knowledge that you were using here. They're shaking hands and Nixon is smiling. Again, I don't know what Mao is doing. I'm presuming it is a smile, okay? And it also shows a difference in culture of the two countries because of how they are dressed. I simply put that in because I was writing what I saw. And this is firsthand what I wrote down when I did the pen and paper and set myself the time, okay? For example, when I'm talking about the way they're dressed, for example, Chairman Mao is not dressed as rich as President Nixon. This could suggest that the USA has more money than China does. Source B is a speech from President Nixon, and now, sorry to stop there, but now I am changing. So I'm writing half of my answer on source A, and now I'm writing the next half of my answer on source B, so there's a balanced amount of writing there. So source B is a speech from President Nixon that shows there has been an agreement to end 22 years of hostility. Okay, I simply wrote 22 there. It would be better for you to write the actual words 22. But if we move on, the source shows that there have been hostilities between the two nations in the past that have divided China and the USA. It also shows that the visit has gone well and that they are now going to work together to build a bridge. If you look at it from that angle, a question such as that, you can use the source material from this picture, the source material that is there, to actually write quite a bit. Okay? I wouldn't advise, that answer would be about as much as we're looking for. It certainly could be a little bit shorter, but I would say that's a top answer there. Okay, that's what I'd be looking for. You've actually gone into each of the sources, you've pulled out little nuances or little pieces of evidence that show perhaps the handshake, the smiles. I did go into a bit more detail about the clothes. You could mention that. But it is asking about relations. Yeah? What are the relations? When we go back to this one, the relations were bad and they are getting better. In 1972, you can even mention that things weren't as good. You do the math in the 1950s as they were in 1972. Okay, so that is the example of question 1A. There's what I wrote. Okay. Again, this is good revision, listening to this tape here, this video rather, because it's refreshing your memory, or maybe filling in little gaps, or maybe highlighting gaps in your knowledge that you don't have. And really, this is what took place. Okay, so we move on. Another thing I will do with each of these questions is hints. I'll give you hints for question 1A. So a hint for question 1A is pick out at least 2 points from the sources and connect them with a historic inquiry. Okay, so when they talk about relations, you would say, relationship would be, is it a good relationship, is it a bad relationship, what am I looking for there? If Nixon was frowning or they were sat and they weren't facing each other, it would be a bad relationship. Yeah. Moving on, make sure you refer to both sources in equal measure to produce a balanced answer. Right, so don't write too much about source A and avoid writing that much about source B. We are looking at we are looking at a 50-50 split, so write about both sources there to get top marks. Okay, now we move on to question 1B, and this begins with use source C and your own knowledge to explain why why something has happened, or why in this instance, if we move on, it's going to be why China got involved in the Korean War, but I don't want to spoil or give away any surprises here, so let's have a look. In question 1B, you will be asked to use the source material and your own knowledge to explain a development. Okay, something that happened, an event or a development. Okay, and that's worth 6 marks. So you can understand how there might be a little bit more writing involved here. Okay. We want you to utilize a single piece of source material. Again, it could be written or visual, so it could be a poster, or it could be a speech, or it could be from a textbook, and then you need to use your own knowledge to explain a particular historical issue or event. Okay, so an example of what question 1b is, in the China under Mao, 1949 to 1976, the question here is use source C and your own knowledge to explain why China became involved in the Korean War. Now, the source is from a school textbook. Okay, so we're not asked to evaluate the source as such. We just need to use the source, okay, and your own knowledge to explain why China became involved in the Korean War. Now, if we read this, as the North Korean army collapsed, Mao was faced with increasing appeals for help from its southern neighbor. The possible presence of a US-influenced Korea bordering China was deeply worrying to Mao. On the 7th of October 1950, US forces crossed the border from South into North Korea. Okay, I'm going to go straight in and show the answer I gave rather than waste time. I wrote, source C shows that China became involved in the Korean War because Korea appealed to China to help them from USA. Okay, and it does. You can see that Korea was appealing to China for help, to Mao for help. It also shows that Mao was worried about having a country that would be influenced by America next to China. Furthermore, it shows that on the 7th of October 1950, US forces crossed the border from South into North Korea, which must have made matters worse. Little spelling mistake there should be an S. Matters worse. From my own knowledge, I know, and there's nothing wrong with writing, from my own knowledge, I know that North Korea was a communist country and that it had the same ideas that China did. This meant that they didn't want to have rich people ruling poor people in their countries. Sorry about that. As I said, it was exam conditions, and I've copied exactly what I wrote. They wanted everyone to be equal. To extend, so I'm adding more to my answer, I know that Chairman Mao believed in a communist revolution and wanted it to spread to as many countries as possible. He would want to protect his ideas and would help other countries that shared his ideology or his ideas of how the world should be. Both countries were willing to use war to protect their ideas. Okay. It really is in there, and apologies, I have got a cold, I'm sorry about that. But there is, if you go back, you are using the actual source, which does tell you what actually happened, why China became involved in the Korean War. Okay, it says there, as the North Korean army collapsed, Mao was faced with increasing appeals for help from its southern neighbor. The possible presence of a US influenced Korea border in China was deeply worrying to Mao. So he didn't want capitalist ideas on his doorstep because he thought they would spread into China. And on the 7th of October 1950, US forces crossed the border from the south of Korea into the north of Korea, and they actually fought their way all the way up really to the top, nearly in China, and Mao had to send troops in to fight them back. North Korea and South Korea today are a communist country and split in two. Okay, so there's the answer there. Again, any problems, let me know, get in touch, but I'm sure if a source like that, which it should come up, you can use that source and then your own knowledge to pad things out. Okay, so we'll give you a couple of hints for question 1b. Pick out at least two details from the source and explain them in your own words. That's what I tried to do there. Okay, so rather than just copy exactly what was said, you can put it into your own words. And then you must demonstrate your own knowledge of this topic by providing at least one additional factor that is not mentioned in the source. And there are huge rewards for own knowledge in this one. So if you can add to it, as I said, I can't 100% say to you, I wouldn't like to say 50%. That question might not come up at all. Okay, but a type of question in that format will come up, and if you pick out two details from the source and explain them in your own words, and then you demonstrate your own knowledge around that topic by providing a further additional factor which is not mentioned, whether, as I said at the end of that, North Korea and South Korea remain a communist country to this day, there are huge rewards for putting that piece of source material like a jigsaw piece into the actual puzzle itself, and then writing one or two things around it, or one thing either side of it. Okay, and I hope that will help with 1b. Now, Question 1C will always start with how useful a source is D&E to a historian studying. Now here I'm going to give you a bit of advice on this one, and it really is, we'll go on to it, but it really will help, and you'll see what I mean now. So this is a utility, so the use of two sources is basically what that means, okay? And it's worth 8 marks. The point is to analyse and evaluate the usefulness of the two sources for purposes of inquiry. Evaluation should concentrate on what the sources say or show, the nature of the source's authorship, and the date of publication and purpose of the source. Now, that sounds a bit of a mouthful, but it is evaluation. How useful? Yeah, it's one of these questions: how useful, how important, how far, how good. Yeah, so we want a judgment. And we want you to prove certainly positive things about the source, but for those marks, we need you to sort of express that you know there's negatives, there's failings. No source in history can be absolutely perfect, okay? Every source is biased. But we will move on and you'll see what I mean. Now, I've taken, the question is, how useful a source is D&E to a historian studying Chinese foreign policy 1949 to 1976? And it's worth 8 marks. But the important thing I'm going to say to you here, if you were in your exam, you can underline these command words. Okay, you do this a couple of times, you run through this video or do a couple of past papers, or we'll go through this. But once you start realizing here's your command word, and actually they're asking you how useful it is to a historian studying Chinese foreign policy from 1949 to 1976, okay, there is a timeline which is important there. But let's have a look at what we've got here. Source A is a poster, a Russian poster of the early 1950s, and it's in praise of Chinese people. The caption reads, "Glory to the great Chinese people who have gained freedom, independence, and happiness." And source E says, the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legal government of China. Taiwan is a province of China. It's a small part of China, that means. The liberation of Taiwan is China's internal affair, in which no other country has the right to interfere, and all US forces and military installations must be withdrawn from Taiwan. The Chinese government firmly opposes any activities which aim at the creation of one China, one Taiwan. This was a statement that was issued by Chinese government during the visit of President Nixon to Beijing in 1972. Now, we've seen President Nixon had gone there, relationships were getting better, okay? But if I go into my answer, you can see this is studying Chinese foreign policy. Foreign policy is when a country looks at what's going on or what it intends to do outside of its home. Okay, foreign, it's not at home. If it was at home, it would be domestic policy. You've heard of, I'm sorry to say it, but if you hear of the term domestic violence, that is violence that takes place at home. Okay, so foreign policy is what is going to take place in different countries. Now, if we or the relationships between different countries, well, let's have a look at my answer, and I can go into what I've written and how this really is not as difficult as it looks. Okay. So source D shows a poster that was created by Russia, and it praises and wishes the Chinese people for following communism. For a historian studying Chinese foreign policy, it shows that China and Russia enjoyed a friendly relationship in the early 1950s. At this time, China and Russia had signed a treaty of friendship. However, this poster, and you can see what I'm doing now, I've given the pluses. So if you were a historian, you wanted to know what happened, Chinese foreign policy between 1949 and 1976, well, it's not going to give you the true picture here, right? So I've spoke about what it is showing in the early 1950s, and at this time China and Russia had signed a treaty of friendship. I know this, okay? They got on. If you think about it, this is when they're actually sending in Russian scientists, although some of them are whack when it comes to the farm in Lazenki. when it comes to the farming advice that they give him, but they do become friends. And at this time, China and Russia had signed a treaty of friendship. However, this poster does not show the decline in relationships between China and Russia after Stalin died in 1953. Mao did not like Khrushchev's ideas on communism. So source D does not show the full history of Chinese foreign policy between 1949 to 1976. Okay, you just get this little view of what went on. A historian studying this might think, China and Russia were great all the way through. No, they weren't. You use your own knowledge and you say, well, they weren't. Okay. So we will move on to the next part. Even though this is on one scroll, I would then write another paragraph saying, because this is an 8-mark question, source E is a Chinese government statement that was issued during the time of President Nixon's visit to Beijing. I've only reiterated, or I've only copied what that source has told me. Okay, it was written to make show the American. It was written to show the American people that China was in control of Taiwan and had the power and right to liberate the province. Okay, it shows that China was prepared to go against other countries to hold on to their idea of controlling Taiwan, and demands that all U.S. forces and military installations must be withdrawn from Taiwan. I've simply used what is called a soundbite, or a little quote from that source to show that I'm aware of that. However, source E only shows a perspective through Chinese propaganda and does not show a historian evidence of China's better relationship with the USA. For example, in 1971, the People's Republic of China had been accepted into the United Nations, and that trade and cultural links were already beginning to be made. So this source does not give a balanced view to the historian studying the full picture of Chinese foreign policy between 1949 and 1976. It doesn't. Okay? Things got better for China and the USA at this time. So there would be another way to, there could be a couple of ways to write this, but I think you are actually stating and coming down in your agreement at the end of each paragraph there that both of these sources are not that useful. Okay? And I mean, you could stress that right at the end if you wanted to in a small little paragraph. Therefore, both of these sources are not that. Remember, that might not be the answer. There could be sources. One could be good, the other could be bad. Both of them could be very useful. Okay? So it's a judgment you would have to make there. So let's just kind of finish on this final slide. A little bit of extra help and advice for the hints and tips section for question 1C is look at the content, origin and purpose of both sources. When it comes to the content, what does the source say? Stop and think. What does the source say? Yeah? Is it saying good things? Is it saying bad things? But most importantly, remember what that question is asking, what these two sources are going to be useful for a historian to study. If they are going to be, if that question is going to ask you, is source A and source D and source E useful for studying Mao's agrarian reforms, then make sure you look at what would be useful for studying agrarian reforms. And if there's a lot there, then you could say these are excellent, yeah? It shows the good side, but it also shows the bad side. If it shows the good side from a Mao's point of view, or communist point of view, then feel free to comment. It is not telling us, it was written by a member of the Chinese Communist Party, so it is not highlighting the problems that came after with regards to the Great Leap Forward. Okay, so feel free, use your own knowledge and get it in there. But the content is really comment on what they are saying. Okay, each of those sources. Okay, the origin, who said it, when did they say it? Timeline is important there, knowing your times, because if you have, I'm assuming the question will say 1949 to 1976, but if you've just got a source which is just, or the two sources are just at the beginning of the period or just at the end, well, a lot has changed for China in that point. Okay, a lot has changed. So bear that in mind and feel free to talk about that. Purpose, why was it said? Who was it said to and why? Is it biased? All sources are going to be biased, okay? When you get to A-level and when you get to university, you were kind of taught that, and you're sort of, the answer is, if you're going to say it's biased, please say why you think it's biased. Because it was used for propaganda, because it was a bibliography, or someone had to write the bibliography, say, for Mao. Well, if you're going to write a bibliography for Mao and he's still alive at that point, well, you better write things that are nice, otherwise he's just going to get you killed. Okay, or the Maoists will get you killed. So you can't really tell the full truth there. And likewise, if it's just written from American point of view, well, they are going to be biased, and they will use propaganda to make Mao, because he's a communist leader, look bad as much as possible. Okay, so because they don't agree with him. Something here which I always like, a good an acronym, is COP. Okay, we were talking about being a detective, so hints for question 1C: be a COP. Content, origin, and purpose. Okay. Another tip would be, make a reference to the usefulness of both sources to the historian. But when I say that's a tip, I would strongly recommend. Well, I wouldn't strongly recommend. If you write about one source, they can only mark you on the one source. You write about two, you've got the chance then to get both marks. Okay, I believe it's a 8-mark question. Let me just double check that. Yes, it is. Okay. So if you write a who, if all of your answer is just going to be on source D, the most you can get would be probably about a 2, maybe a 3, because I'd be looking at those extra marks, and again, I'd be looking at those extra marks to see that you've actually evaluated. So if you write about a little bit about well, when I say a little bit, but if you write a balanced amount about the 2, okay, and then add an evaluation in either both paragraphs or at the end as a separate paragraph, then you are looking at full point possibility. Okay, and I'm going to leave it at that. That's the end of Route A, Unit 1. Question 1A, Question 1B, Question 1C for China under Mao Zedong from 1949 to 1976. And I hope that helps. Thank you very much. Tango time.